welcome to another episode of Between the Post. My name is Tyler Vaughan, and I am your host on Between the Post, where we talk about all things soccer related. We try to focus in on goalkeepers, but of course we understand that we are the minority in the game, so we will always bring topics that are relevant to coaches of all players of all positions, and obviously parents and fans all alike. So we're very fortunate to have the second part of a podcast with Karl Dewazien, who Karl is actually a very good friend of the show and obviously brings such great knowledge, such great experience with him to every single episode and topic that we cover. This is part 2 of small-sided games. Again, we're basing it on Karl's 30 plus years. I won't round up, of course, and Karl will appreciate that. But we're obviously talking with Karl, and he comes with many years of experience at the state director level out in California. Karl is also the author of many wonderful pieces on his website, fundamentalsoccer.com, but also his book, The 9-Step Practice Routine, where we're pulling out one specific element, which are the small-sided games. If you listened last week, you would certainly have gotten the feeling that Karl does such a wonderful job of packaging information, and I think that probably is where most of our listeners have found most helpful and useful any of the episodes and the conversations, and at least that's where I find speaking with Karl such a joy and a pleasure, and also such an informative time. We always seek to bring topics of relevance to coaches, to players, and to everyone in between. Obviously, keeping up with trends that are currently going on, challenges that you might be facing and that we're hearing you're facing, and the brilliant part is these are all challenges we have been through as well on the show, and our guests have some level of expertise in specific areas. We hope that this is always a comfortable place for you to come listen to a podcast. We don't really get into the bells and the whistles, to be completely transparent and honest with you. We hope that if we've created a platform where you, the listener, can come, challenge the ideals that you have, or improve upon areas of weakness or areas that you potentially might just be struggling with. Like we all have. So we are happy to have new listeners, returning listeners. We are grateful. And we really do ask that if you could just subscribe to the podcast. That way you can be kept up to speed on anything new that we put out. We're especially because we are in season and we're still coaching here. It has become a little bit challenging to get things out every week. So we have been going on every other week. We really want to make sure that the content we put out and the conversations we have on Between the Post, that it's quality content. We never want to sit down around a mic and a computer talking with our guests via phone and having these conversations if it's just for the sake of having these conversations. It is a platform where we want to deliver quality to you and relevance. And if we're just having conversations that really don't impact the listeners' lives out there, then I think that we feel that's kind of a waste of your time and our time as well. So we set on the fact that doing it every other week allowed us to maintain that high level of quality and make sure that we're making as big of an impact as we possibly can. So just ensure that that's what you're getting into. If you're a new listener here at Between the Post, we understand there are lots of options out there, and we again are very grateful. We do hope you'll subscribe and be kept up to speed on everything that we're doing, the new guests that we have on and the new episodes that we're putting out. That way it pops up on any device that you have, anywhere that you're listening, and you kind of know what we've got going on new that particular week at Between the Post. This is another wonderful episode with a great friend that I have been so pleased to get to know even better. Always have such a high level of respect, and I'm always humbled to have conversations with Koach Karl Dewazien. Again, this is part 2, so if you're just tuning in, we do highly suggest diving into part 1 first, just so you're not coming halfway through the conversation. But nonetheless, if you want to keep listening, I assure you, though you might miss a little bit, you are going to be blown away and gain just as much from part 2 with Koach Karl Dewazien on small-sided games. This is Tyler Vaughan, and we know you're going to love this one. So right before we hand it over to Koach Karl and myself, of course, wanted to give you a little bit of background on what we had talked about last week. Now, whether you're a returner or a new listener, I thought it might be wise to kind of remind you of where we're going to pick this conversation back up with. We had just finished towards the end of part 1. If you haven't listened, or maybe you're needing a bit of a reminder and a refresher, we just discussed talking about the environment in a small-sided game, as well as just generally the environment that we should expect our players and allow our players to create themselves. So we're kind of picking back up with that, and I'm going to ask a question to Coach Karl as it relates to the environment, the playing environment during small-sided games with players, and his opinion on the appropriate number of soccer balls, and whether that's even appropriate to begin with to have more than one soccer ball. So again, just to give you a bit of insight, if you need a bit of a refresher or just new to the show and new to part 2 here, Coach Karl is going to pick back up with that, and we had just previously discussed the appropriate way to create a suitable environment so that we maximize player growth, player development, and ensure we are creating fun environments, and more importantly, allowing players to create their environment to, again, maximize growth and maximize the engagement that our players have with training sessions, games, and just in general, the game of soccer. So we're going to hand it right back over. Part 2. So when you move past that, if you have a larger space, isn't that an opportunity? I know that you'd alluded to this in the past, but what are your thoughts on, in terms of a variation, adding multiple soccer balls into a particular game, in a small-sided game?
The number of balls that are out on the field. You can have 1 ball, 2 balls. Who cares what the numbers are? If the players are moving, the balls are moving, some learning is taking place.
Yeah, okay.
You need to figure out, is what they're doing, is that what you're trying to teach? So, for example, you may have 3 soccer balls on the field, and they're playing 7 aside, but your theme might be takeovers.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now, what's the takeover look like? All right, we might have a player who, if he's touching the ball with the inside of the foot, that means he's keeping the ball. If he's dribbling the ball with the sole of his foot, it means that his partner is going to take the ball. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because if I'm using the inside of the foot, there's a barrier there, and for me to take it over, and I've seen this too many times, they actually tackle each other.
Yes.
So what you want to do is leave a free ball, which means that you're using the sole of the foot while the opponent is being screened, and your partner knows that he's supposed to take the ball. Or you can do a verbal one, and we use buzzwords on that. In my case, I would say Karl, which meant I'm going to keep the ball. If I said Vaughan, what do you think is going to happen?
That would be the takeover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, number of balls, absolutely. Number of goals that you can score on. I think you should always start with 2, 1 to attack, 1 to defend. But you can have triangular goals. You can have 3 goals. You can have 4 goals. The bottom line is you need to adjust the field of play and make sure that the players on the field are learning what you're trying to teach.
And I don't want to jump ahead, but I'm curious too, just kind of on the variability of small-sided games, but kind of what we're talking about a little bit. Would a suitable option to add in some variety, would it be to add in goalkeepers? What are your thoughts on that, where we currently, as we're talking about where we are now with the versus games?
My feeling is that once the goalkeeper is introduced into the game, you should always have them on the field also.
Perfect.
Even as a field player, because now you know on the back pass they need to know all the different techniques. And I've seen too many professional goalkeepers screw up just with that one touch, giving it to the opponent. So you
have been looking on YouTube, haven't you? You've seen all my my epic fail videos of when I was a player. Oh, it was me. It was just, trust me, it was me. No, I could not. So obviously, between the posts being a somewhat goalkeeper focused, we listen, on some level, we address the entire game of soccer. That's the point of this. But no, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, as a current director of goalkeeping, we spend a portion, dependent upon the age, but really at every single age. It just depends on kind of how much we focus in on it and the skill of the players. But basically, we'll tier into the session, whether it's the warm-up portion or distribution principles, that we'll tier in, and if it's a warm-up, whether they're going through a speed ladder, through cones, or whatever it is, dynamic something, we'll start with a ball to the feet. Boom, 1 touch back, 2 touches, whatever it might be. Ball back to the feet. Then we'll build into a low ball. Then we can use our hands. Then we'll go up to a kind of basket catch, belly button. Then we'll go above, high ball. So I think that you're right. It's get them in, and obviously the formal introduction of goalkeepers is the 7v7.
But Tyler, to expand on that, I don't necessarily mean that you introduce the goalkeeper and just have them in that area in front of the goal.
Yep.
I think small-sided game, they could be out on the field, and what you just finished saying, the different levels of serves that are being given could count as a goal. So let's say that the goalkeeper's running around, he still has his uniform on, he still has his gloves and all that. But in the small-sided game, if the team can get the ball to him at let's say belly button height, that's a goal.
Yep, get it off the ground, simple game. Absolutely, I've done that many times, and it does work very well for just that. Because it's not only working for the goalkeeper, but now you're essentially integrating a different passing technique or a passing focus with the players that are playing the ball, because they're having to put a bit of loft into it. They're having to kind of chip underneath it, get the ball up off the ground, but with accuracy. So, yeah, I love that. Another good one as well, you could put those goalkeepers you talked earlier about a neutral zone. You could put the goalkeepers, and I've done this before, in a space, whatever is applicable if we're going off of our 4+0. I guess, I don't know how would the number change then if you have goalkeepers in a neutral zone at the end zones, essentially? Does it matter necessarily? But is that your 4? Is it your 6+0 then if you've got neutral goalkeepers?
But you have 4+0 on the field.
Okay.
To be sure that you have good technique.
Yep, exactly. So yeah,
to have the neutral players or the goalkeepers on the side, that doesn't add to the number of opponents on the field.
Gotcha. Well, now I'm worried about my mathematics skills over here, so I wanted to make sure. But no, so on your point though, put the goalkeepers in the neutral zones, and as you look at your transitional play or whatever your theme is, right? But you're passing, play into the goalkeepers. So that's another little drill that you can implement with something like this and working the goalkeepers in.
Well,
so
you said the nasty word, but I am going to correct you on
a drill. Did I say drill?
Yes, you did.
Oh, I did. I didn't even mean to. My language is poor today. I apologize.
It's probably the storm that's coming in.
That's right. That is right.
One of the things that they also need, or what I suggest is, it's not necessarily that the goalkeeper is neutral on one team. He can be neutral for both teams.
Yep. I definitely agree with you.
2 goalkeepers out there, and one per team, or again, use your imagination and make sure that the theme is being worked on while you're working in these small-sided games.
Well, I think from a goalkeeper perspective too, you hit on something that some people are thinking, duh, why are you explaining it? But I'm going to explain it anyway. So, but you're hitting on when you isolate goalkeepers to specific teams, you essentially cut their workload in half and their involvement in the game in half, potentially. So having them be neutrals for both teams essentially gets them more involved and gets them a better opportunity to be involved from a practicing whatever it is, whether you're playing a ball into their feet or you're playing balls into their hands because of the theme and the game that you're playing. But I definitely agree with you. Keep those goalkeepers neutral. It's a time and an opportunity to get them involved as opposed to isolate them to just one side or one team, right?
Absolutely. So let's go back to the small-sided games, and the number of touches can be changed in the small-sided games. So in if it's passing, it could be one touch the ball only.
Right.
Or as we said earlier, in order to get a good pass, it would be 2 touches. But in an even-sided game, you could also have the rule of 1 touch. The one touch that I would like to point out, and we talked about this before, is the shooting on goal. And this would be on the small-sided games as well as the scrimmage. But what I suggest is that you put together a neutral zone. You mark out a neutral zone, which means that once the ball goes inside of that particular zone in front of the goal, the players have no options but to one-touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't care if they miss the goal. I don't care if they hit the goal. I don't care if they get it to the keeper. I want the habit of once you're within your shooting range or within your shooting your distance, I expect you take a crack on goal. Because it's not necessarily happening where goals are always beautiful. They happen by mistake. They come from toe kicks. They come from all kinds of different ways. And I think that in order for us to get that habit, we need to mark out in practices a neutral zone in front of the goals. Once the ball goes inside, the closest player must one-touch the ball. But, here's the but. Make sure that once they take that one touch, and even if they miss the goal by 100 yards, like some of the guys that are taking penalty shots and the pros are doing right now. If they miss the shot, make sure that they always follow their shot. I don't care if they miss it, if they make it, they must follow their shot. Because one of the poorest habits that I've seen is youngsters who take a crack on goal and then it's Coke break. I see it at the high school level. I see it at the college level. The ball comes off the goalpost, nobody there to follow it. The ball comes off the keeper, nobody there to follow it.
Oh, it's a pet peeve of mine. I agree.
Yeah, so in practices, the one-touch zone is 2 techniques. 1 is take a crack on goal. 2 is follow the shot, no matter where the ball goes. Now, following your shot also means that we take a run, and I ask my players, and we're talking physical fitness here, I ask the players to run and touch the goal line, and then they run backwards, and this is more for the younger players, because most of them are not able to run backwards too well, but I ask them to run from the goal line backwards outside of that neutral zone or the shooting zone.
So what type of technique, because I'm going to dive into that a little deeper, so what type of technique is that backpedaling? Because basically I know you're working on just purely the physical elements of it as well, but we're also kind of touching on defensive principles in terms of how they're tracking back to make sure that they can either track back in defense or whatnot. So you're kind of teaching them something indirectly that they're going to need down the road anyways, right?
Right. What you're teaching them is called reading the game. Mm-hmm. In other words, the ball is in a certain area, and if you watch the pros, I mean, it's horrendous. They'll all turn around once the keeper has the ball. They all turn around and start facing in the opposite direction. They lose sight of the ball. So what you're doing is you're reading the game. If the goalkeeper doesn't have possession, obviously I might have a chance at the ball. Or if the goalkeeper has the ball in his hands, I still want to see, is he going to roll it out? Is he going to throw it out? Is he going to punt it out?
Right. Well,
the player needs to do that.
No, go ahead. I apologize. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying that the bottom line is we want the players to be able to read the game rather than just turning around and saying, well, I missed, what am I going to do now? Yeah.
No, the only thing I was going to add is this is something that a coach who's listening or a parent who's listening, tell your player, right? I mean, then have them tell other players around them, right? It doesn't really matter how the information gets out there. This should be implemented. If it's not already being implemented in the team you're working with, your son, your daughter, you're the coach, you're the parent, or you're the player even, if this isn't being implemented, implement it immediately, because you are spot on. It is potentially the difference in immediately winning a ball because of a loose distribution from a keeper, because you're paying attention and your eyes are on the ball. Think about how many times that the ball just sneaks right over a player's head because their back is turned to the ball and they never saw it coming anyways, and if they'd have turned around, it'd have practically hit them in the face. But those are opportunities as players continue to develop, as the competitive level rises throughout a player's playing career. Those are opportunities, and those are lessons that we have to be teaching players at younger age groups. And I think you're right. Not only is there a physical element, because I've seen a billion soccer players who are very young try to backpedal and then end up flat parallel on their backs on the ground because it's coordination. So that's great from that standpoint. But purely from a developmental standpoint as well, you've hit on something that's it should be happening. Backpedal, eyes on the ball, making sure that if there's an opportunity to quickly counter, win the ball, or a loose punt from a goalkeeper at that level, and frankly at any level, who knows what could happen if you're paying attention and your eyes are on the ball. So that's something coaches or whoever's listening out there in the world of our wonderful listeners, take it to your field, take it to your team, take it to your game this weekend, and whether you're the individual that's implemented this and you're taking that out there, or you're the coach that's telling your team, simple thing to do that can have a massive impact, a successful impact as well, which is a good thing to have.
So Tyler, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think it's very important to the coaches need to make sure that if the player misses the shot on goal, or if the player makes the shot on goal, you still want this: follow your shot and go backwards outside that line. Yep. It should happen after every single attempt on goal. And if you have 2 players inside the neutral zone, that neutral zone we're talking about, then both have to follow the shot, touch the goal line, and go backwards. If it's 3 players, all 3 do it. because in practice, what you're trying to do is create habits that are going to be beneficial in the game.
Right. I absolutely agree.
Okay, so let's go to the one touch in the defending zone, the red zone. We do, again, mark out a big, gigantic circle, and what the size of that circle would be is about the distance that you think the opponent can shoot the ball on goal.
Right.
Anytime the ball goes inside of that zone, your defensive players, the ones that are inside that neutral zone, they one-touch the ball. Get the habit of getting the ball away from goal, and then obviously what you want them to is at least sprint outside of that zone. So again, you're doing two things in attack. You're doing your shot on goal and following the shot. In the defensive zone, what you're doing is you're clearing the ball, and you need to follow your pass.
So playing devil's advocate, because I want to get your take on this, what's the argument for so many coaches and methods out there of playing out of pressure? So meaning instead of one touching it away out of your 18, thinking that we need to have our 12-year-olds trying to connect passes out of their 18 to build the attack. What are you thinking? What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I think it's great. Let the coach have their players try it. Let's see what happens. If the opponent scores, whose fault is that going to be?
Yep. Okay. No, that's good. I just, like I said, just wanted to bring that in and offer that angle for sure. So
well, I think the bottom line is, if we don't create good habits in the players, then they're going to do those things in the game. And what I've seen happen is you take a player who's trying to be creative in the defensive zone or inside of that area. They lose the ball. The shot is taken on goal, and then we blame the player for it.
Right.
I don't blame the player. What I do is I blame the coach for allowing him to do that in practice.
Right. Yep. Fair enough. No, that's a great explanation. That's what I was hoping for.
Well, that's what we're here for.
That's what you're here for. No, absolutely. Right. I agree with you.
Okay, so we've gone through the one touch, and it could be out on the field. It could be inside of the two neutral zones in front of the attacking or defending goal. Two touch, I think we've covered pretty well, and that is the rule that you want to apply when you're trying to teach your players how to pass the ball, and it would be neutral players. But now we can come up to 3 or more touches. Okay, and this goes into, in my opinion, the attacking zone.
Right.
We don't have very good creative players, let's put it that way. If you have an individual who is fairly close in the attacking zone toward goal, my personal preference is for them to attack the opponent and go for it.
Yeah.
Get into a distance where you can shoot on goal. Well, how do you do that in practice? Well, if he's fairly good with 2 touches or 3 touches or 4 touches, ask him to do a 5-touch. Figure out how can I hang on to the ball and still keep it away from the opponent. If they're really super great dribblers, increase the number of touches and challenge them so that they need to figure out some way to hang on to the ball and still get a crack on goal.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that it's anytime there's space in the attacking, we're kind of talking the attacking third, obviously, but I do agree, and I support the fact that I was thinking, why don't we have skilled players on the ball? Why don't we have the Messis? And that gets into what you said earlier, which is it's how we're raising them up and how we're not, a different environment, right? So again, not to get completely over head into that, but players aren't playing with the ball at their feet more. They're not exploring, or experimenting with moves and failing with them, but that's fine. But they have to experiment first. Attacking when there's space behind a defender, I absolutely agree with, and I'm assuming that's something you would agree with as well. How the coach responds to inevitably, 1 out of 3 times when the ball gets taken off of the attacker's foot. Maybe it's 1 out of 5 times that they beat a defender. I don't know, but how the coach responds, right? I think that too many times we say, hey, Johnny, whenever there's space behind the last defender, go at him, attack him, put a move on him, try to get around him. Johnny does it, follows exactly the instructions we've been going through in games and in the week prior or the months prior in training sessions. And what happens when Johnny loses the ball? The first person to tell him, what in the world are you doing, is the coach. So I think that brings to brings to question. Obviously, we need to ensure that we are being supportive of these players, and when we're asking them to do these things, we understand that the failure rate 1v1 for players who are learning how to do moves and learning how to control the ball at a high level, we have to be a little bit reasonable there. I definitely agree with you, and I think that that's something that that gets into why. So we didn't quite touch on this, but I know it's something you and I have spoken about before. That gets into the importance of the one versus one. We're breaking the game down, right? And that's why you have that in the first half of a training session, right? The first half of your practice, which is it builds into the bigger picture. So I definitely think that as we look at multiple touches in the small-sided game, I think that it brings to the front of the conversation the importance of allowing players to go 1v1. There are so many different phenomenal drills. Again, go to YouTube, bypass the goalkeeper fail videos, please. But go to YouTube and figure it out, right? I mean, there's a million 1 versus 1. There's a million ball control drills where we're trying to instill creativity in players. Teach them the technique first, but then allow them to go out and play. So again, this stuff's flooding into my brain, but I did want to just say I agree with you on that. But it's how coaches respond to players when we put them in those situations. They're going to fail at some point. They're going to lose the ball, but we want them to continue to, to work on whether it's the theme in a training session or whether it's the experience that they need in the game as well to become a successful player in the short or the long term. So.
Well, Tyler, I think you're really learning well, except the use of the word drill is really driving me.
Did I say it again? Oh, my goodness.
You said it about
every time I say it, I'm losing 10 listeners. The good thing is I think I only have about 5. Well, 6 with you, but I might lose you too if I keep saying drill. So, yeah. Well, you're reforming coaches one coach at a time, and you've started with me. So I can assure you, though I might slip up, I'm much more aware of that word now and since our first conversation than I ever have been. And I agree with you, as a matter of fact.
Very good.
Conditioning through repetitive conditioning, just like on the soccer pitch. That's what we need here.
That's the whole idea. So let's finish off with the touches. Like we talked about the 1 touch, we talked about 2 touch, and we talked about 3 or more touches. The way that the coach enforces those rules inside of the versus games, not in the plus games, because plus games is teaching, but inside the versus games is you take a point or you give a goal to the opponent that once the player is told it's 1 touch rule within that area, if they 2 touch it, a goal for the opponent. If the rule is 2 touch and they 1 touch it, a goal for the opponent. If the player that we talked about, and let's exaggerate it, let's say we ask him to touch the ball 11 times and he touches it 9 and shoots, a goal for the opponent.
Right.
So the motivation for the players to learn the theme is to give the opponent a goal by not adhering to the theme. All right, let's go through some other adjustments that the coach can make in small-sided games. One of them is, and I'm sure you've heard of this before, playing only 1 foot at a time. So if you have players who are all right foot dominant, the small-sided game would be that you play left foot only. If they touch it with the right foot, it's a goal for the opponent.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Working on the non-dominant foot for sure. Absolutely agree.
Right. You can ask them or the coach can specify which part of the shoe that they want the ball to touch when they're either passing, when they're dribbling, any of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more technical, but coaches need to be aware of that. A lot of children don't use the sole of the foot, and you might make it a theme for the practice that the sole of the foot will be used. And anytime that you're changing direction, or if you're using, going backwards, whatever it might be, they have to use the sole of the foot. If they don't, a goal for the opponent.
That really work on multiple surfaces with players' feet, to be completely honest with you. So I think that for me is a huge one. And the variation too, I didn't want to interrupt, but the variation with limiting the left foot, right foot, the less dominant foot, I guess, or just the pure fact that players are having to think about what foot they're receiving with, I think that's valuable too. I think that those are overlooked variations. I think that we want to complicate personal experience, again, let's talk about just me then instead of others, but I know in the past I've wanted to overcomplicate particular games that we've done, but I want to overcomplicate it, right?
Great job. I'll stick around a bit longer.
I'm gonna, yeah. But I mean, seriously, I've overcomplicated games. I want to have the variation from I don't know, from Pep's book, right? And it's not needed because I guarantee you put those players out there and you say, hey, use your less dominant foot, use your left foot for most players, use your left foot. All right, and you base a variation on that and that alone. I guarantee you're going to have a lot of people who are sweating pretty hard and squinting pretty bad whenever they're thinking, "Oh my goodness, this is tough." Right? Or if you're talking receiving with different parts and receiving a pass, dribbling with your laces or whatever, passing the ball, whatever it might be with a particular surface of your foot. I think that again, a variation that we overlook, those simplified variations that players. It's not. We don't have to tactically create variables, tactical variables in the games as much as we need to be thinking about the technical variables that we can integrate into our training sessions, into the games that we're playing, because those are real life circumstances that players need to make split-second decisions in a game, understanding what foot to use appropriate of the pressure that's coming at them, understanding what part of the foot to use dependent upon the direction they want to go with their first touch, right? Those are things that you get through simple variations like this, and I want to make sure that we touch on that let's quit, talking to myself, let's quit complicating things. Let's remember that let's ensure that, I guess, there's learning, and learning doesn't always have to be complicated. It can be very simple, for sure.
You know, I like the word that you've used quite often in this last segment, and that was the word simple. Keep it simple.
Yep.
And, you know, it's things that the coach can observe. Again, I'm going back to what I said earlier. The coach's biggest job is to observe well and look for what do the players need to improve in and apply those things in the small-sided games. I mean, obviously we're working it in the 1 + 1, 1 versus 1, but the small-sided games is where you want to perfect it, because now you're versus against more opponents, so you have to make more decisions.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you there for sure, and I think that I've learned the simplified philosophy here from almost over 10 years of coaching now. You come out early on in your coaching career, and most all of us do. If we come out of, whether you had just played collegiate soccer, you're coming out, you're super enthusiastic, you still got that ridiculously insane competitive cutting edge that's been ingrained in you for the past 4 years, or you just are a volunteer that's stepped up and you're super enthusiastic about the opportunity, but we overcomplicate so many different things. And I think that if, again, a takeaway for those listening, no matter whether you're a coach, parent, or a player, is that sometimes the simplest of variations create the most maximized impact on player development. I think that for sure is important. It can be done so very easily. This isn't rocket science, but the impact you're going to see that it has on your players' skill levels, it's exponential.
All right, the next one would be, and we talked about it with the goalkeepers on the field, but would be height limitation. So what you're doing is you're giving points to the team, to the opposing team. Let's say that if the passes are above head height or the chest height, if you want the players to pass the ball on the ground or keep it on the ground, then that's what you want. As soon as the ball leaves as soon as it leaves the ground, the opponent gets a goal. So what you're doing is, as a coach, is not necessarily making the kids look bad, but you're making the rules make them focus on what they're trying to learn. Mm-hmm. So height limitations would be a good one to add also.
Yep.
Okay. Another one, everyone plays. What does that mean? It means that you can't score a goal until every single player on that team has to touch the ball before you go toward goal or shoot on goal. Something that a lot of coaches don't do. They allow the strongest player in practice to dominate the ball, score all the goals in the game. The dominant player gets the ball, scores all the goals, and the rest of the kids don't improve because they very seldom touch the ball. So I think it's important to use this game as much as possible, that every player has to touch the ball before you go toward goal, and that includes the goalkeeper. So back pass to the keeper and then releasing it out to the backs and all that kind of good stuff. I think that's very important to me.
Yeah, and I think that it also, we do find ourselves a lot of times allowing, whether it's on purpose or obviously sometimes, most of the time it's not on purpose at all, we do allow, and the players allow that stronger player on the team, that player that they envision, whether it's the leader on the team at any level, at any age, or whether it's just the kid who's more developed, right? We have to ensure from an educational standpoint too that we intervene to a certain extent, because players will be content to feed that number 10, to feed Johnny's feet, because they know that every time they put the ball in Johnny's feet, he's going to do something phenomenal. But then again, we're sacrificing all the other players around him and their development. So I think that it is an opportunity as a coach for us to jump in and to ensure with this type of variation that everyone is working and everyone is involved. I think that the power of the team is obviously to a certain extent something we need to, we always need to think about involving others in instances like this for sure. So could be if it's a 6 versus 4, you could, instead of all 6 players, maybe the level maybe that doesn't work for the level of player you're working with. You could just say 3 out of the 6 players need to touch the ball, and then you can go to goal, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And the coach needs to adjust, right? Use your eyes. If it's working, use it.
Yeah.
If it's not working, adjust it.
Yep. So should the coach? I'm going to fire a fastball at you. Should the coach be involved in playing in a variation like this?
Oh, that's no, really. I'm going to leave that up to the insurance companies.
Yeah.
Because I've seen many kids out there getting injured by an adult.
Yeah.
And my question always is, if it happens in the game, then practice it. If it doesn't happen in the game, then don't practice it.
Right.
I've yet to see a coach out on the field, playing with the players.
Yeah. No, I get.
I'm totally opposed to it, because we've had lawsuits and everything else. And in a lot of cases, you have somebody who's very skilled, and they control the ball most of the time. Well, who's learning the game if the coach is, controlling the ball?
Right. Same philosophy. If you're the one talking, and they're not playing and the ball's not moving, how much learning is really going on, right? So I agree with you. I knew your thought on that, and I completely agree with your philosophy on that. And you're coming at it from a state director level where you're right. I mean, it's a liability, 100%. So for club directors or those that are involved in the leadership of a club or an association listening in right now, think about that again, because I guarantee you, I see it all the time. I see that coach out there that's reliving his college years out, dribbling circles around 10-year-olds. And again, I probably sound like a jerk to somebody listening, but to the others, they're probably laughing because they've seen the same coaches out there doing it. But, and I'm thinking, well, that's good for you, right? But unfortunately, let's take a step back. What are those kids learning? That it takes 4 players to kick a coach in the ankle and to still not get the ball? Are they learning anything? No. While everybody's sitting there staring at the coach dribbling circles around that one player, what are the kids learning? Nothing, right? So you're coming at it from a very logical perspective, and I'm coming at it from come on, we've got to take a step back and make sure that we're not doing that. So that was a good time to bring it up, because I know what's going on out there, and I know how you feel and I feel about that.
Well, let me go even a step further. I have seen coaches pre-game where the players all pass the ball to the coach, the coach releases the ball to the player, they take a shot on goal. Now, who's getting all the ball touches?
Yep.
The coach is, okay? Now, I thought the coach was supposed to observe and see a weakness. Well, what are they doing? The ball's being passed to the coach, he releases the ball, player takes a shot on goal, absolutely horrendous technique, and the coach is ready to serve the next ball.
Or doesn't even see the shot on frame because his back's to the plate.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, who do you think should be the player that's standing there releasing all those balls?
I would say it'd probably be one of your midfield players if it's or your target forward. I guess it could be either though.
Well, I would say the weakest player, because he needs practice in releasing the ball correctly.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree with you.
Repetition. And if you've got the weakest player and you've got 10 games and 2,000 serves, maybe after 2,000 serves, you can actually release the ball to the weakest player.
Yeah, one would hope, right? One would hope. But no, I agree with you 100%. Absolutely spot on. That particular game is happening.
Well, that excellent.
That's right. Yeah, that particular I don't know what that is necessarily, but that particular setup is happening in every single probably many warm-ups throughout the United States. I guarantee you, every single weekend. So we might have cut deep into the youth system from a coaching standpoint, but you're right, absolutely. You're not only is it not good from a technique, but getting into the game, getting touches on the ball standpoint. If you're doing that type of exercise in a warm up for a game, but again, like you said, how are you helping players if it is a part of your training session with your theme? You're not watching a single player strike a ball, and who knows if they're shanking it 10 miles wide or if they're putting it in the top corner. How can you correct it, or how can you reaffirm the positive technique if you don't see it? So 100% agree with you.
Well, Tyler, I'm kind of hoping that we have individuals who actually get paid to coach, because they are role modeling these types of situations, and mom and dad coaches watch them and they copy them. And I'm telling these professional coaches, don't role model something where you're touching the ball all the time and the kids aren't touching it.
Right.
Kids, especially the ones that are weaker players, need to be the ones that are doing, like, I call it America's favorite exercise, which is the ball to the coach, it's laid off, shot on goal, go to the end of the line. I don't know why we still have that. 40 years later, we've been trying to teach this, but we have professional coaches who still use it as a warm-up, and that is really a very sad situation. I hope the guys listening stop it, and let's do warm-ups, especially prior to games, a little bit more conducive to what's going on in the game.
Right, absolutely. It's like we've decided to focus our, especially in a warm-up before a game is, it's a very important time for many different reasons, and it's limited time as well, depending upon the game before. Maybe you've only got 30 minutes to warm up. Maybe you've only got 20 because the game ran over, right? You've limited time. You've got to pack in as much as you can to prepare your players, and preparing them for a potential scenario that could happen, 5 times maybe, that you play a ball into a target player, lays it off, and you're in range for a shot. I don't know. Maybe that happens 2 times. Why spend 10 minutes of your warm-up doing it, right? Especially if you're playing the ball into your coach's feet and they're laying it off, right, which they're not going to play for the next 80 minutes or 90 minutes or however long the players are playing. So I definitely agree with you. Again, other resources out there for sure for the coach that's doing that. Not that we're calling you out. Obviously, we're trying to make everybody better here. Just go take a look out there and Google soccer warm-ups, and I guarantee you, or go on to the NSCA site and look at some of the online resources. I don't know where you get it from. Go to your DOC at your club, but find an alternative. I definitely agree with you there.
So let's finish off some other thoughts on small-sided games. The coach can give points or goals, and again, this is all during the versus games. You can give a goal for beating the opponent with a specific fake or feint. Remember, we're trying to, whatever the theme is, if they apply it in a small-sided game, give them a goal for it. And don't coach them. All you're doing is just jotting down, Johnny just did a slice, and he beat the opponent, so the team gets a goal. You could have it for a successful give and go. You could do it for the defense if they do a nice poke tackle or, forcing the ball over the touchline. One of the things that I think a lot of coaches don't do is, why not give goals to the kids that show good sportsmanship?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it makes me, if you think back, I don't know what that video was, but there was a video of the Barcelona team. I think it was a Barcelona youth team, a very young team, the Barcelona team that went over to Japan, and there was a video or commercial or something that aired that the game was over. The Japanese players, the young kids, the Japanese players were, their heads in their hands, they're crying, they're sobbing, they're on the ground, and you see the Barcelona young players go over and consoling them. And I think it's that mentality that we have lost a little bit in the U.S., or we've forgotten that it is important, is that we have to be teaching players how to be good sports, to be supportive, right? Whether you win or you lose, that it's not necessarily, I think that the example that was used in relation to that video was, it's that if you look at, as a coach, if we are looking at the opposing team as an X and we are an O, that's not the right way to look at development from a soccer standpoint in the United States. If we're looking at that opposing team as an opportunity for us to get better and for them to get better, and potentially on that particular day they might be the better team, I think that we're missing something. And I think that you're right, that we do need to reward sportsmanship, reward when players are supporting other players constructively, of course, reward when somebody speaking up, whether communication is something at the level that you're working on or not, whether they're taking some leadership roles and telling players to step up, to shift to the left, to the right, applicable at the appropriate level, of course. But nonetheless, I think that video, I've seen it, I'm sure a lot of others have seen it. It came out later on that, I think originally the coach of the Barcelona team had told them to go over and, hey, console the players. They just lost this international final, I think it was, but instead it was not the Barcelona coach that told his players to go over and console. And I mean, you saw these wonderful images of the Barcelona players hugging the Japanese players. I mean, completely different cultures, but all joined together by one common goal and one common dream, one common love and passion, which is the game of soccer. And I think that sportsmanship and really encouraging players to think about that, right, and to not just be so concerned about the winning and the losing at the end of the day. I think that's something, if we can start to do that a little bit better as coaches around the world and coaches around the country for a start, or our club on some level to start, I think that's a better thing for sure. So I love that you added that. I might not have quite thought to add that in.
Well, I figured I'd surprise you with that one. How about one more surprise?
Go for it. It's probably a question, and if I don't know the answer to it, we'll just cut it right now and go to a break.
There will be no questions asked. I'm just going to give the answer, and that would be the use of small-sided games while the coach is working on set plays.
Okay.
And let me, for an example, the corner kick.
Right.
I just finished watching at least 3 or 4 high school coaches working on corner kicks, and they've got the whole big. Both squads are in the middle of the 18. The guy half the time can't kick it into the area.
Right.
And what are these coaches doing? And then they expect a goal to be scored they can't score in practice, but they expect goals to be scored in the game. So here's my suggestion. First of all, you need to figure out who are the players who can actually put the ball either to the near post, mid post, or far post. So you have the whole team try it out. It's not just necessarily one player. It might be a surprise player who can do that for you. And if you've got a player who can put it to the near post, then you set it up accordingly. If it's the mid post, set it up accordingly. Far post, set it up accordingly. But now what happens is you should have, in my opinion, have that individual and with one attacker and possibly a stationary goalkeeper practicing that particular corner kick while the rest of the team is playing a small-sided game.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good spin on small-sided games too, that I think that maybe we potentially lose. And I don't know, but I think to a certain extent a lot of coaches around this beautiful nation of ours, I think that they isolate a small-sided game and think that it's a versus only environment, that it's a 4v4, right? And obviously we've talked none of that, to be completely honest with you, really, and we've talked about uneven, unbalanced, and other approaches to the small-sided game. But it's also an opportunity for the variations and to bring in all kinds of variability that we want to work on, but we're going to get more out of by doing them in conjunction with a small-sided game. So I'm glad that you added that in there too. That's a new thing for sure. So I'm glad that was a good surprise.
And let me add to the surprise, because what should happen is the corner kick, you have 2 players that are practicing the kick. So you've got one who's trying to accurately hit the other one. But the goalkeeper has to start in a stationary position, either on the right side of the goal or the left side of the goal, because you want those 2 individuals to be successful. The next stage would be that you have the goalkeeper move, and he can choose to move left or right, and again, leaving an open gap. Eventually, we have the challenge of the 2 individuals, corner kick, and the one that takes the volley on goal versus a goalkeeper that's active. Then what you do is you bring a second individual in, because if we can score off the near post, let's go to the mid post. Now you have 3 individuals, the corner kicker, near post, mid post. Have them practice it, start with the stationary goalkeeper, and progress from there. Eventually go to the far post. But I don't think you should introduce an opponent against those three attacking players that are receiving the ball until they're successful at least maybe 8 out of 10 times against a stationary opponent, and maybe 5 times against a moving opponent. But don't start introducing opposition until you have accurate corner kicks from that individual. In the meantime, what's happening is the rest of the players, the rest of the team, are having fun because you're not there to annoy them or judge them or stop them from playing. They're playing small-sided games.
I think that so the only thing I'll add, because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus or say any names here, but add as it relates to that is and relates specifically to the numbers, right? Is and presenting an opportunity for success, because that's kind of what I hear the underlying the setup that you're discussing there, and how many players you've got in the area that are receiving that versus the pressure that may or may not be there. I saw last week at a very young age a coach that was out serving corners at a young age, academy level, serving corners to basically it was probably a 5v5 inside. There wasn't really an 18-yard box, obviously, at the younger U8 kind of level, serving corner kicks to 8-year-olds in a situation. So there are many things already wrong with this, but in a situation where it was even. So we're serving corner kicks to essentially a 5v5 with a goalkeeper until we readjust our thought process. It's not to say that you and I are completely right or completely wrong, or there might not be a better idea or method out there. That's not really quite the point. But as we talked off air before we started this today, we talked about the fact that to a certain extent, and I heard this the other day as well, and I told you this quote that it was from Todd Bean, who is he's actually the son-in-law of Cruyff. He said that if we are going to intervene in a child's life, then we better make sure we add value. I think that coaches need to remember that. We need to think about it from the player development side. We need to think about it from how much value are we adding as we go throughout our training sessions, from the games that we bring to the table, from the situations and scenarios we put our players into to try to find success. Some of the simplest things that Carl, you've gone through today and you've introduced, whether it's just in the appropriate space, the appropriate goal size, the appropriate amount of players that either we are playing against or not playing against, for that matter. I think that those are all decisions we must start to make as coaches to ensure the success of our players. Because if we're not adding value to their lives, then what are we adding? And too many times as well, we are forgetting, whether it's at the club level or even the association level, I think that we're forgetting that to a certain extent, many of our coaches out there, they work other jobs, right? They're volunteers or they have other jobs, and it's potentially their jobs that they're customers. It could be a customer-based situation where, we wouldn't do certain things with paying customers, but yet when we go to the soccer field where parents are paying, we're forgetting that the level of value we bring, the thought process we put into a session and the games, and again, many of the things that we're touching on here, I want to be really clear. These are super simple methods and ideas that could immediately be utilized in your next training session with small-sided games. I didn't want to end on a low note, so I wanted to hopefully end on a higher note. But I want to make sure that this podcast and this platform, this is an opportunity for real conversations to happen, appropriately, of course, but for real conversations to take a real look into what we're doing. As we stated earlier on, that the reason that we do this podcast, and I know the reason that, Carl, you're so gracious in spending so much time with me, is because you've dedicated the majority of your life, as I have to a certain extent, for sure, to the game of soccer and the passion and the love that we both have for it, and to be a part of the solution, not to be a part of the problem. So Anything else to kind of, have we missed anything? I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to tie a nice little bow on small-sided games here. I mean, it's been wonderful. It's been challenging for me, as it is in every conversation we have, which is why I love talking to you, because I think that if we're not challenging ourselves, change is hard, right? Change or looking in the mirror and kind of introspectively at what we might be doing as individual coaches, that's not always comfortable. So I love having conversations with you because of that reason, is that it gives me the opportunity to question what I'm doing, what others around me are doing, how I can improve myself, the players I work with, and the coaches that I surround myself with. So I'm grateful for the opportunity that any time that we get to spend together and talk through the brilliance and the knowledge that you bring to the conversation. So I'm grateful for that.
I'm hoping that somewhere along the line somebody else will call me brilliant.
Yeah.
But,
next time, it'll always be me. You know that, Carl. It'll always be me. Don't worry.
Yeah. One of the things that I would like to add is you're talking about the coach who's taking the corner kicks for 8-year-olds. Again, the first question I have to ask is, does it happen in the game? If the answer is yes, then practice it. If the answer is no, then don't practice it. First of all, when is that coach going to get an opportunity to kick corner kicks in a 5v5 game with 8-year-olds? Second, if he's doing the serving, are there kids on the opposing teams who can actually do those things? Can they put the ball in there just like everybody else? And obviously the answer is no, and that's why the coach is kicking the ball. And I'm sure that there are high balls, and I know that the Federation has already mandated that there are no head balls up until the age of 12, I believe.
Yep, you are correct.
So, high ball coming in, you've got a dangerous situation again. And we're talking about concussions and all those things. And I'm not trying to be negative, but what I'm trying to say is I think the adults need to stay away from the kids, allow the kids to learn on their own. Let's create an environment like around the rest of the world where the children are laying out their own environment. They're playing their own games. None of them do drills. None of them do any exercises. They all just play soccer.
Right.
And I think what we need to do in this country is teach our children to play soccer on their own. That, to me, is the biggest criteria for us to improve.
Carl, you are brilliant. The respect I have for you and for I'm fortunate to be able to call this a conversation, because frankly I should be paying for the conversation, and truly the opportunity to listen, to hear, to learn. I will continue to work hard to get this out there to all the coaches that we possibly can, because everyone needs to hear this. Whether you think that you're doing it the right way or whether you know that you're doing it the wrong way, I want to learn another way. I think that this is an opportunity for those listeners to really, again, take a look at what they're doing. And it's been wonderful to spend time with you. We align in more ways than I probably even know. I think that the one thing that we always come back to, and I think we did this in the past, and we'll continue, I'm sure, in every conversation that we continue to have, and I'm fortunate enough to have with you, is that we always come back to this, and that is you're saying about players is what exactly? You're kind of famous. You're famous.
The outcome of our children is infinitely more important than the outcome of any game they'll ever play.
And on that note, I want to thank you very much, Coach Karl, and Coach Karl Dewazien. Obviously, Coach Karl has a few phenomenal books out there. Let them know again, if you don't mind, Coach, your websites and how they can reach out to you and how they can find other wonderful information or learn more about the many phenomenal things you have going on.
3 W's, fundamentalsoccer.com, and I'm always open for questions, and the questions that I answer are also going to be published, because other coaches are going to have the same situation and the same difficulties that you have. And hopefully together as a community, we can make sure that these kids play in a much better environment and they actually get one childhood.
Coach Karl Dewazien, we thank you very much for being on the show again, for giving us your time, for giving us your knowledge, and hopefully for helping other coaches out there. I think if we continue to seek to improve, impact, or influence one coach out there, inevitably that one coach at some point will influence and impact 15 players. Those 15 players at some point hopefully will impact another 15. And then together we will take this game that we continue to dive into. We continue to try to figure out how we can fix some things, change some things, and just improve the time that our kids are playing it. It's always wonderful to speak with you. I'm grateful for the opportunities, and we are very much looking forward to the next time we get to speak with you. So thank you so much, Coach, for being on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Tyler, and you did a brilliant job.
And this brings us to the end of part 2 with Coach Karl Dewazien. And I always, of course, like to end on a positive note, especially when my name is a part of that positivity. But no, in all seriousness, we are always so grateful to have Coach Karl on. And I mean, can you believe it after listening to hopefully parts 1 and 2? But he's phenomenal. He's absolutely top-notch and packages things in a way that I tell you what, I wish I could speak just as eloquently as he does and as knowledgeable as he does about the games. But I tell you what, that's why we offer this platform to find fine young gentlemen like Coach Karl Dewazien and others that we've had on. We hope this has been a wonderful time that you've spent with us, full of knowledge, full of education, and full of thoughts and ideas that you can take yourself to the fields, to train with your players, to train yourself as a player, or to support your player if you're a parent. That's what this show is all about: education, inspiration, and motivation for the modern-day soccer player. My name is Tyler Vaughan. This is Between the Post, and we will see you next time.